Alright, without further ado, I will begin my first speech. Are you ready? Alright. I will start now. One of the biggest challenges students face in America today is whether they can afford to pay for college or not. The fact that students are wondering whether they should pursue a higher education due to financial situations is a serious societal regret, which is why we affirm the resolution that this House will eliminate all student debt. First, I'd like to go over some definitions. We define eliminate as to put an end to or get rid of. As student loan as a loan that is used to pay for a student's education. Debt is state of being under obligation to pay or repay someone or something in return for something received. And the burden for today's round is whoever can increase societal productivity. On to our first contention, and it will be about medical students and how they will be helped. The amount of debt that medical students drown in is insane. The average medical student owes $200,000 in debt throughout the course of medical school, in addition to debt from undergrad college. Students in medical school already have a ton of school to go through. Coupled with the insane amount of debt, this provides a very daunting college and post-college experience for anyone thinking about going into med school. This is one of the reasons why we have a doctor shortage in the US data published in 2020 by the Association of American Medical Colleges, which estimates that the U.S. could see a shortage of 54,100 to 139,000 positions by 2033. In 2019, 53,371 college grads applied to medical school. But this number can be higher if we eliminate student loan debt, because the benefits of going to medical school will definitely outweigh the cost. Dr. Scott Holliday, Associate Dean of Graduate Medical Education at the Ohio State University, College of Medicine in Columbus. These factors include time, cost, and availability of medical training. This resolution will help address the cost factor, and even though it may not be perfect, it will still be a step in the right direction. According to Time.com, in 2035, the U.S. will have more people aged 65 plus than younger people aged 17 or younger. Basically, we're having a declining and older population. This worsens the doctor shortage in the U.S. even more, which is why we need to affirm this resolution to help get more medical professionals into the field. The nail in the coffin for doctor shortages come in the form of burnout. According to a March 2021 survey conducted by Mayor Hopkins for the Physicians Foundation, 38% of physicians said they would like to retire the next year, and a study conducted by Mayo Clinic in late 2022 found that doctor burnouts were at an all-time high due to COVID. Go ahead.
Do doctors know what they're getting into when they place themselves under this enormous debt?
Yes, but the problem is many are discouraged to do so. I specifically talk about a doctor shortage because of that. They're worried that the harms may outweigh the benefits. Now, continuing on, other factors are further exacerbating this dire crisis. This resolution will get more doctors into the field. Now, the negation might try to argue that the doctor shortage is mainly a US-centric problem. It won't hurt to have more doctors in the world. A study conducted by the journal The Lancet in June of 2022 found that an estimated 6.4 million physicians are needed to meet goals for universal health coverage across the globe. A lot of doctors are needed, and anything that can help reach this goal will be helpful for society. Remember, we want to find a society as like our version for today's round. More rural places as well will benefit greatly from more doctors, such as isolated villages in jungles or the desert. Affirming this resolution means that these students who are in medical school will get the debt relief they need to alleviate the massive amounts of debt they will receive going through the journey in college. Undergrad students who are looking to go into medical school will have any debt they currently have. With their current debt gone, undergrads will be more incentivized to actually go to grad school. They in turn will have a higher chance of becoming doctors, which will help the major doctor shortage in the United States and get doctors to places they need across the world. On to my second contention. Students can go to college without worrying about money. As I've already stated before, Money is a big concern when students go to college. Many students alleviate the cost by choosing to attend a community college. And when they eliminate student loan debt, these people don't need to make decisions anymore. They will be able to get a higher quality of education without running into highly involved costs. That will indirectly benefit them in the long term anyway. They'll make more money and contribute more to the economy. Part of our solution is that this can help the long run. The long run will be very important for our debate today. Go ahead.
With people being able to go to college without worrying about money, doesn't that make it the demand for really just Ivy Leagues much higher than
Sure, and we'll have some of the best people, but they don't have to go to Ivy Leagues if they don't want to. They can go to like different colleges and graduate as medical doctors. Now, it will also help people who originally couldn't afford college to access to higher education. The elimination of debt also provides an incentive for students to pursue a more expensive career path, such as medicine, as stated before. Even though this resolution talks about a one-time instantaneous debt relief to the people in college right now, governments will do this again in the future because they will see the success of it. Colleges, especially for-profit colleges, will jump at this opportunity. This is because they see the government is willing to spend more money on college students, and if they rack up more debt, the government will step in again. Many of these colleges will increase the price of tuition, citing reasons that may not be true, such as inflation is increasing the cafeteria food prices, so students will have to pay more. Additionally, loan forgiveness is feasible. Forgiving student loan is an investment. I repeat the word investment. While it may cost hundreds of billions of dollars to eliminate these loans, the long-term benefits will substantially outweigh the upfront costs. According to Money.com, people who do not go to college instead of to work right out of high school make around $30,000. Meanwhile, those with a bachelor's degree make around $52,000. That is almost twice as high. This is double the amount of money right out of high school made. And according to APLU.org, people with bachelor degrees are half as likely to be unemployed as high school counterparts, and will make $1.2 million extra in your lifetime. Even though countries might get some debts, this is not a bad thing. When evaluating whether or not debt is good, economists mainly look at two factors. One, is the investment worth it? And two, is the credibility harmed? Both of these factors support this debt. And because the debt is a good investment, because we are putting back into the youth of the future, the ones who will go into medicine and all these high-paying jobs, as it can help many college students, and the credibility of the debt-receiving nations will not be harmed, as most other countries are doing the same thing, and the debt came from a noble cause. So in conclusion, affirming this resolution would help the U.S. and the rest of the world in solving big problems such as doctor shortages and student loan debt. These students need this opportunity to help them focus on their education, which will bolster the current workforce.
Graduation is a magical moment. The lights are glaring down the stage, students look in their awesome robes, everyone is so proud of one another. But as the caps fly into the air, a sense of dread flies into the hearts of everyone who chooses to take on a loan to afford college. If this is a high school graduation, the debt is just the beginning of the end. It is just the beginning, and this is a college graduation. The reality is paying back a loan is becoming real. Either way, financial equity brings financial strains later in life. the student debt crisis in America is a real challenge for the 43 million students who opted for a loan. But on segregation, we don't see this as much of a problem as it is to cancel debt, and therefore we oppose resolution this House to eliminate all student loans. First, we would like to establish a more grounds on today's debate. This House may be a world body, but most student debt, approximately like 90% student debt, is housed in America. So this should be really an American-focused debate. And we also reject the burden that the affirmation business, and we propose the burden that this round, that whoever wins this round should win on the basis on the most fairness and benefits to society. Our first contention is that students are personally responsible for their debt. Before accepting college, if not before applying, every family has the money talk. As a result of different circumstances and issues far beyond the scope of today's debate, every family or individual has a different capacity to pay for college. This is just real life. Only so many students will receive scholarships, so students who set on pricier schools turn to financial aid, aka student loans. Those in favor of forgiveness love to paint a picture of helplessness, deceived or trapped high schoolers, signing away the future of the burdens of debt. But that's not quite right. Let's unpack what really happens and what's up with the student debt crisis in America today. Our first point, no thank you. First of all, we want to mention that loans are voluntary. Every American currently paying student debt voluntarily signed a contract to borrow and repay money. For starters, college is optional. According to Ball State University, only 52% of Indiana's class of 2021 went on to college. And that's way above the statistics for most current debtors that went to college. The Census Bureau estimates that only around 24% of Americans have a college degree. And again, it is true that college degrees boost employability, but the other options are very real. Beyond that, cheaper colleges are always an option. Again, small private colleges are expensive, but again, that's not a surprise. These are private institutions. Community colleges and trade schools, considered a college for student loans, around the country provide great opportunities at an affordable price point. Public in-state colleges are tax supported to provide high-quality, affordable bachelor's and master's degrees. So look here, an example in Indiana. IU and Purdue University cost a fourth of what Rose-Hulman does. Both provide engineering degrees. And for example, IU and Vanderbilt will give you a liberal arts degree. By the time you graduate, of those with student loan debt, 12.4 million choose to attend private for-profit schools. Again, they choose.
Yes. Well, I have a higher chance of being getting higher pay if I go to say Harvard for medicine instead of a place like Ball State for medicine.
Okay, of course, your employability might be slightly higher at a place like Harvard that is so prestigious, but this is unrealistic for most Americans because number one, Harvard Medical School is already full. It's full. There are not going to be more people going to Harvard Medical School. And the second thing is that there are other medical schools around the country which can provide as good of an education, at a cheaper price point than Harvard Medical School. Our second subpoint of this is that most loans are payable. Although debt forgiveness would be greatly acknowledged by those with debt. I mean, again, who doesn't like free money? We should also acknowledge that it is not necessarily needed. Of 43 million Americans, a third graduated with less than $10,000 of debt. The median debt of all American adults is between $20,000 and $25,000 according to the National Center for Education Statistics. While that's certainly significant, it is really payable. According to Georgetown Center on the Education Workforce, those with a bachelor's degrees can expect an average of millions more in lifetime earnings. This requires budgeting and planning, but again, it is feasible. According to Brookings, nearly half of all student loans is owed by doctors, lawyers, and PhDs. And again, that makes sense. These are individuals with terminal degrees, attend as much as 12 years of post-high school education, and alongside their high debt comes incredibly high earnings. Georgetown reports that doctors, lawyers, and PhDs have a median income approaching $4 million. That's an incredible return on investment. The best educated people in America can make that math work. These numbers are medians. Some will far exceed these earnings, and some will far below. Often because they find lower-paying jobs in some sort of public service, non-profit hospitals, public defenders, and criminal justice, government, and professorship. A subset will join groups like the Peace Corps, Doctors Without Borders, or AmeriCorps, to name a few. Good news! The government provides a rated program just for this group. PSLF, Public Service Loan Forgiveness, provides an alternative route for those called to a life of service. After 10 years of non-consecutive employment at nonprofits or any level of government, during which debtors are asked to only pay what they can have as little as $1, any remaining debt is federally eliminated. Our second contention is that this would benefit the rich while not helping those that struggle financially. Less than 20% of American adults, again, have student, again, like 24% of American adults have student loan debt. Is it really fair to offer relief to those who are overstretched their financial capability to go to college and not to those without student loans, but who still may struggle financially? Yes?
You state there are 24% of Americans that have student loan debt. Just because there's a 24% number doesn't mean that we can't help society by helping that 24%.
What I would like to clarify is that 24% of people in America have student loans, and the other half don't. These people should not pay for other student loans that the people who took on loans decided they would take on. Students from families earning more than $114,000 a year borrow at the same rate as the lowest income families, and they take out loans nearly twice as large. Students with advanced degrees, doctors, lawyers, and others account for 40% of all student debt, according to estimates by American Progress. And the top 25% of income-earning households hold almost half of all student debt. Student forgiveness would be largely a hand to the better off, the rich. More than 90% of children from the highest income families have attended college by age 22 versus 35% for the lower income families in protected times. Workers with bachelor's degrees earn about $500,000 more over the course, again, over $1 million more than individuals with high school diplomas. That's why about 30%, again, 34% of all student debt is owned by borrowers in the top quartile of income distribution. And again, we can see that by cutting student debt, this will benefit the rich, and by cutting debt, we are saying that students are not personally responsible for taking on student loans. And we are saying that they can take on basically whatever they want and it will be covered. But in the negation, that is not the world that we stand for. Therefore, I urge vote in negation. Thank you.
So before I start, I also want to say a couple things. I think Abraham got most of them out of the way, but I'll go ahead and maybe add a little more. So of course, I kind of want to get to specifics. I want to thank my entire team, of course, Abraham, Eric, and of course Jasper, who had to sit out. Just of course, a little bit of world schools. That's kind of the thing with world schools, of course. There's always the deciding of who gets to sit out. Also, I'd like to, of course, thank my coach, my parents, my team. Thanks to Henry Mayer for being a great team leader. And then I'd also like to thank Arun, who was a temporary member on our team, but still had a significant impact for all of us. And I'd also like to thank Wyatt and Brian. Lastly, I also want to thank the opposing teams. The reason being that this is probably our 5th round with them this season, and our rounds with them have always been great, very productive, I'd say, and very fruitful. So thanks for being a great competitors, and I'm glad that we can have this final round here at Skates. Is that in mind? You guys good? When we hear the stories of how people in college have to continuously pay off their debt for several decades, it makes us wonder what consequences this truly will bring to all of society. This brings me to contention 3, which is increasing quality of life and productivity. According to the One Wisconsin Institute in 2013, a typical student loan is structured to take 10 years to pay off, but it actually takes 21 years on average. For those 21 years, these individuals in deep debt ultimately are going to be set up in a bad state of mind. After all, they have thousands of dollars of debt to pay off and potentially no way to do so. According to the Office for National Statistics in 2022, people in the UK with mental health problems are nearly 3 times as likely to have debt compared to individuals with similar conditions. What does this tell you? Well, not only does debt create a financial burden, it has serious mental health implications. Amy Watney, writing for the American Psychological Association, argues that, quote, while debt is increasingly common, many graduate students, for instance, feel isolated by the shame of being in the red. And of course, that keeps them from having honest conversation about it. Many students say they prefer just not to think about it because adding more money stress to their academic stress is simply overwhelming. Yes?
Is it these students' choices to take on this debt?
Sure, it's their choice, but it doesn't mean that they should be put in a position where they have to deal with all this stress. Ultimately, we agree that there's a problem with student loan debt, but these students, as we're going to get into the rebuttal, have to go to college. They have to get a college education to be successful in the world. That's ultimately what we're going to be talking about when we talk about your kids. Moving on. Not only are these students who are pursuing higher education unable to overcome their debt issues, they aren't even actively acknowledging their debt situation in the first place. So when they say, well, didn't these students choose to be in this position? Well, they did. Many of them didn't even realize that they were going to be put in this position in the first place. That's the deceptive factor of college. Moving on, what's worse is that according to Richardson, Elliott, and Roberts in their 2013 study published in the Clinical Psychology Review, people in debt are 3 times more likely to take their own lives. When students' loan debt is forgiven, they not only enable themselves to be in a better mental position, they will be better off financially. This ultimately amounts to better productivity, whether that be no longer having to work multiple jobs to make ends meet, or no longer eating only 1 meal a day. Regardless of what the exact fix is or the improvement is, these individuals would now be able to focus all their worries into being productive for their one job. Furthermore, these individuals would have more free time, allowing them to be more physically healthy, pursue intellectual activities, and possibly even start their own families, all of which, of course, are good for a nation. This is why it's frankly so important to eliminate student loan debt. By affirming we can not only better the lives of those currently in debt, we can help these individuals live up to their full potential. With this in mind, let's go ahead and address the negation case head-on. The first thing to talk about is how we are basically mostly talking about the United States. And for the most part, we probably agree with that. Most of the problems with college are in the United States. No problems there. What we're going to have a problem with is their burden of fairness. They come up here and pretty much give you a burden on the fly. They tell you we should have fairness and social well-being. The problem is, when they say social well-being, that's basically our entire burden of social productivity. Their entire case has nothing to do with fairness whatsoever. Most they talk about is, of course, rich families, which don't worry, we'll get to a little bit later. So prefer our burden of societal productivity, because that's ultimately what we're talking about with college. I mean, why do people go to college in the first place? So they can be productive in society. They can have a job that they enjoy, and they can actually create change in the world. Now, on the contention 1 about how people are personally responsible, they talk about how people willingly take massive amounts of debt. This is a mischaracterization fundamentally of how the scenario works out when you actually go into debt. First, people actually have to make a living, as I've already stated. College is by far the most lucrative guarantee to having a good paying job in the future. Second, they might say, well, these people could have gotten jobs otherwise. Remember this, not everyone wants to work a job that doesn't need a college education. I might want to go into chemical engineering. Guess what? That needs a college education. Ultimately, if you want to have human dignity, if I want to feel useful in the world, guess what? I'm going to have to do the job that I enjoy. Maybe that's chemical engineering. And guess what that means? It means I'm going to have to go to college. So if they say, well, people don't have to go to college necessarily, guess what the impact is? You're damaging people's quality of life, their human dignity. People are doing jobs they may not enjoy. And that's what's important today. Any points?
So students should have the choice to go to whatever college they want, as you say, or whatever degree that they might choose. Does this mean that college in America, or I guess around the world, should be free?
We didn't say it should be free because this resolution specifically talks about limiting student loan debt. That's just fallacious logic. Now, I want to talk about this idea of how we currently have community colleges and current student loans. Sure, these exist, and we acknowledge they exist. The problem is this has nothing to do with resolution. But the only thing they do talk about is important. When they talk about community college, where is the community college for a medical student? We already know we have a doctor shortage. That's what is really important here. Then, in a point, they're talking about Harvard Medical School The fundamental problem is that no one is attending these medical schools. Sure, they exist, but those medical schools are totally useless if no one actually attends them. That's the problem. When you have student loan debt, even in the long term, even if you might make $4 million, guess what that means? You're going to be instantly disincentivized in the short term to take on all this much debt, because guess what? During that time that you have that debt, you're going to be living paycheck to paycheck. And we all know doctor residents don't even make that much money in the first place. They're going to be eating fast food most of the time. They won't be able to spend much money on anything at all. And that's ultimately what this comes down to. Then, other subpoint B is about how we have most loans being payable. First, this doesn't matter. Even if most loans in the stat score are still payable, it doesn't mean that we shouldn't eliminate the debt for the loans that are not payable. Simply stating that we have loans that are payable is not a point. Second, it's still good to pay off the loans for people who can pay them off. Think about our detention 3. You're immediately better off without debt. Now let's talk about the second detention, which is about benefiting the rich. In a point, they talked about the 24%, and I correctly pointed out that when you have 24% of people having student loan debt, that is a massive disadvantage to society. If we eliminate 24% of people out of America, if we eliminate their debt, that is a net benefit. They can't come up here and say that 24% is a small number. Who knows how many millions of people that is? It's a substantial impact. Then, they talk about the wealthy, but according to NPR in 2022, the White House estimates that 90% of the debt relief would actually go to people making under $75,000 a year. So they're painting an accurate picture. And even if you go by the evidence, we can think about this logically. If the rich people are so rich, then why do they need to take a student loan? They can just pay off the college immediately, and they don't even need to go in debt in the first place. Finally, I want to quickly address this idea of how doctors and lawyers make a lot of money. Again, even if this is the result that we're assuming is true, it doesn't fundamentally matter today's ground. Even if you forget about doctors, there's still this entire amount of other people that are impacted fundamentally by student loan debt. And that's why you're ultimately going to be affirming for today's ground. Thank you.
I want to do things my team. I joined a bit last minute just in January, but I really appreciate all the support they've given me and all the help that they have provided me in learning this new event. But it wasn't completely new because I did have other people that supported me along the way of getting into law schools, and I really appreciate all of you, even if you're not all here right now, like that I said. I want to thank this team because I haven't debated you guys before, but you have been amazing opponents, and it's very exciting to hear all your arguments and to be able to debate against such high achievement. And I do want to thank my team. I want to thank my coach who supported me, even when I would go for at every single tournament my sophomore year. And I want to thank my event head for encouraging me to continue doing this, because otherwise I probably would have quit after a little bit. But thank you. And for the judges, my name is Chen Yao Liu. I'm the second and fourth speaker for the invocation today, and I will begin my time at the end of the session. Okay, I'll begin my third contention. The first negation has constructed today's case for our nation. An American with debt can be reasonably expected to fulfill their chosen obligations, especially as we recognize how incredibly expensive elimination would be. Now, the third contention. Elimination doesn't fail to help, it actually hurts. It's not that the doctor is putting a band-aid on a broken arm, the doctor is just breaking the other arm too. First, this point about finance and economics. We've already explored finance substantially in contention 2. Beyond misappropriated funds, just remember these economic consequences. First, inflation. We've all seen the impacts of inflation right now. And the Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget, chaired by Mitch Daniels, who's our former governor and former Purdue president, estimates that no longer needing to make road payments will contribute significantly to inflation in this entire country. And we all know that the U.S. cannot afford more inflation right now. The second is taxes. The debt will come due, and whether it is today or in 10 years, inevitably the taxpayers will pay. And I want to emphasize that it's not just hundreds of billions of dollars. It's $1.7 trillion. That is more money than the average mind can fathom. It is an impossible amount of money. And student loan debt doesn't evaporate. The colleges have already been paid. All that happens is the student's debt becomes understands the importance of ensuring that we do not drastically cause inflation in our economy by canceling or eliminating student loan debt. And third, this idea of turmoil. If we surpass the debt ceiling and the federal government defaults, which is a genuine fear right now, we're all screwed. Simple as that. The US dollar is the reserve currency of the world because the US has never defaulted. And the moment we break our streak, you can count on a recession. Not just a national one, but an international one. Inflation, taxes, and turmoil. Elimination doesn't fail to help, it hurts. I also want to address that there is no solvency in the affirmative case. No part of the resolution addresses why student debt is as high as it is. This resolution only treats the symptoms and not the sickness. And I'll be getting more to that when I address the first speech. Finally, decentralizing cost cutting. Simply put, higher education costs have skyrocketed over the past 30 years because it can. Unlike businesses, institutions have no sufficient cost to cut costs and become more efficient because they keep having students show up in August. And as long as students are willing to pay, or the government is willing to pay for them and cancel their debt, costs will continue to rise, as the affirmations themselves have conceded. Yes?
For the past 100 years, we've been seeing inflation on the rise. Are we really not going to help 24% of people who are in debt just because of inflation which has been going on for like a century now?
Just because inflation has happened on the rise does not mean that if you suddenly cancel $1.7 trillion in debt, you can't, it's hard to even fathom the amount of inflation that would cost. And furthermore, I do have a source that says that eliminating student loan debt is dangerous for our economy due to inflation and eventually paying taxes. And on the student side, back to my third part about decentralizing cost cutting, the federal government is setting a precedent for forgiveness. History shows us that when something is subsidized, we only see more of it. And if loans become perceived as free money, who wouldn't want to take advantage of the opportunity? More loans means fewer students deciding to minimize their own educational expenses and be financially responsible. Students who receive loans as grants will flock to more expensive colleges who will only increase their prices, once again as the affirmation is admitted. And this feedback loop serves only to dig the country straight into a hole. And through elimination, we jump right in.
You said that you have a card that says that elimination or is going to directly lead to inflation. Can you tell us what is the causal link between elimination and increasing inflation?
Once again, if we eliminate student loan debt, that's $1.7 trillion that we're just canceling, except that money has already been paid. That debt is still there. It's going to lower the worth of our currency, and it's going to be dangerous not just for the United States, but for the international economy. And now I'm going to move on to the affirmative first speech. First, we do not accept the burden. We provided a counter burden that in this vote, we are trying to get societal benefits, not just societal productivity. And fairness is crucial in our society. Once again, bringing up our second, the negation's second contention, about how it is actually mainly the rich that take out student loan debts. And because of these reasons, I really want to go directly straight to their contention, because the affirmation has fundamentally failed to understand this resolution. Their first two contentions about medical schools and about students paying off money for college and that being a major concern and a factor is not related. Once again, we all agree that this resolution means a one-time cancellation of student loan debt. It does not mean free college. College is still expensive, and furthermore, this precedent means that college gets more expensive. Not right now. When we look at their first contention about med schools, first of all, medical students know what they're getting into, and canceling student loan debt for medical students doesn't mean that suddenly we get rid of the doctor shortage. Once again, there are people that get rejected from medical school. And it's for a reason. It's because there are too many applicants. And it's because, one, we don't want unqualified doctors treating us. And two, it's because we don't want unqualified doctors to treat us. And it's also just because there are limited reserves for doctors. Their affirmation does not actually solve the problem of doctor shortages. They just provided this scary correlation, and they want you to believe that enrollment will happen. Furthermore, as the negation has already mentioned, medical schools, lawyers, all the main aspects of student loan debt come from people who go into really high-paying careers. They pay off this debt. They put this debt into they pay it off for the economy, and it benefits when that debt is paid off. We should not just cancel it and force it onto every single taxpayer, especially taxpayers who didn't go to college. Because once again, this resolution does not mean free college for all and for permanently. It's a one-time cancellation of student loan debt. Yes?
For clarity's sake, I'm confused about what you just said there. Your first speaker directly asked me whether or not we're advocating for free college, and I said no. So then why are you guys agreeing with that if you're originally apprentices than we were.
The second speaker may have said that they're not advocating for free college, but all the benefits of their first and second contention are only benefits that are linked to free college. They say that let's say you go to community college. They say that there'll be people will get a higher quality of education. First of all, the quality of education is entirely subjective. I can go to IU and get the exact same quality of education and get the exact same paying career as someone who goes to Harvard. It is not just the quality of the institution, even if Harvard has a more prestigious name. For example, IU and Purdue are some of the best schools in the country for environmental management and engineering, respectively. Harvard is actually ranked lower than them on multiple rankings throughout this country. So why are we only looking at this idea of their higher quality of education being more expensive schools? Second of all, once again, all the benefits of the affirmative vote come from a free college education. They say more people will go to college because they want to work productively. They want to get the jobs they want. But the factor of payment is still there. People still have to pay college tuition. College tuition is still there, and once again, it only increases in the affirmative vote. And just because we cancel this one time, we cannot assume that the country will cancel it again. So student loan debt is still a problem. The affirmation has failed to actually solve any of the own problems they mentioned, and all their benefits do not even exist in their world. And my third speaker will cover their second speech and the rebuttal and the third contention, but I thank you for your time, and because of these reasons, I can only see a valid litigation.
Now, before I begin, I want to also say a couple of things. And while my teammates, Abraham and Malik, have said most of them, I also want to thank my coaches specifically. Because originally, I wanted to do LG at state. And then they kicked me off the state roster. But here I am, right? With the jokes aside, I'd like to start off with my rebuttal. Is everybody good? I want to start off with what my opponent said to defend their... I want to start off with what my opponent said about their third contention. First, they say that forgiving student loan debt is some kind of a band-aid fix. However, a one-time student loan forgiveness, which is allegedly what they want us to do, is actually going to improve things. For example, the Federal Reserve estimates that student loan debt shaves 0.05% off of the GDP per year. Now, 0.05% doesn't sound like a lot. But if we think about it, over the span of 15 years, this 0.05% GDP per year will total $1.3 trillion. So if we forgive the student loan debt, even just once, we are saving ourselves over $1 trillion that we wouldn't have if we just continued, if we just wanted them to pay them off themselves. Like forgiving the student loan debt, it's not a band-aid fix. It will actually do something, as we see from this evidence. Will save $1.3 trillion. And I would argue that this is more of a long-term benefit that would help even more than just saying, oh, you should pay that off. Yes, go ahead.
So this statistic of 0.5% off the GDP, I mean, if it's 0.5% or 0.6%, that decimal difference can equate to, hundreds of billions of dollars, right?
Yes. And that's exactly what I'm trying to say. The 0.05% off of GDP per year over 15 years will make the US government lose $1.3 trillion. So what we actually want to do is address the root problem, which is forgiving these student loan debts. If we forgive these debts, we won't have to lose $1.3 trillion over this amount of time. Okay, now going on. My opponent stated that forgiving student loan debt would actually cause a lot of inflation, but this is not the case. According to evidence from Roosevelt Institute 2022 from the economists Control and Bustamante, I quote, "Our work has shown that student debt cancellation, keyword cancellation, will increase the wealth of millions of Americans who need it the most and promote racial equity, and all without increasing inflation." So, while our opponents might say that we're going to cause inflation, I've provided concrete evidence here from actual economists from credible sources that this is not going to happen. Inflation is not going to get worse. And if anything, the economy will get better because we're going to save $1.3 trillion over the course of 15 years. Now, my opponent then states that the U.S. has never defaulted on debt and that paying off all of the student loan forgiveness would cause a huge recession. However, we're not saying that we have to instantly, just with the snap of our finger, give everyone all of their student loan debt back. That's not what we're saying. But what we are going to say is that if we gradually phase out the student loan debt forgiveness, we'll save ourselves $1.3 trillion over a course of 15 years. And we'll save even more after that. Okay, now let's go back and look over at what my opponents have to say about our case. On our first and second contention, my opponent stated that with medical schools, that a one-time cancellation would not do very much. But firstly, they just self-contradicted themselves. They first said college was supposed to be free and how that would be allegedly unfair and promoting people to go to college for free. But then now they say that with this one-time cancellation, you wouldn't be achieving it. I just want to say that if we do implement this one-time cancellation that we are talking about, this evidence shows you that we are going to save $1.3 trillion. Please, $1.3 trillion, it's a lot of money. And this is the actual root cause that we need to address. The economy is absolutely being decimated by student loan debt. And if we don't address the problem of student loan debt, we're going to lose all of this money. And what my opponent stated about this recession, we're going to cause this recession from this $1.3 trillion of economic development that we're just absolutely losing. Now, going on, my opponent stated that with college and medical schools specifically, that students know what they're getting into. And while this on principle sounds nice, yeah, I mean, if I'm going to go study for a doctor, I know I'm going to be paying a lot. But when we actually see how this happens in real life, student loan payers or students are being scammed. According to evidence from Greenman 2022 from Forbes, Navient will provide relief totaling $1.85 billion to resolve allegations of quote, widespread unfair, deceptive, and abusive servicing practices and abuses in originating predatory student loans. What this is saying is the company Navient, which by the way is the biggest student loan servicing company, and that the Department of Education in the U.S. outsources their work to. That basically means you don't get to choose who you get your student loans from. The government chooses for you. And this company was sued for $1.85 billion simply because they were being deceptive about their loan practices. So while on a theoretical level we would say that, yeah, students should know what they're getting into, but when we see how this actually goes on in real life, we can see that students are being scammed, and we need to not have them be scammed. Furthermore, it states that Navient repeatedly and deliberately put profits ahead of its borrowers, engaged in deceptive and abusive practices, and targeted students who it knew would struggle to pay loans back and place an unfair burden on people trying to improve their lives through education. So yes, students are completely being scammed by companies. Now, finally, my opponent said that contention 1 and contention 2 were somehow based on the idea of a free college. But that's not really what we said. And even if you would buy that point, we still have this evidence. That's that $1.3 trillion are being thrown down the drain if we do not implement student loan elimination. Now, finally, with the last couple of minutes I have left, I want to say something about our burden, which is societal productivity. Now, our opponent said fairness was a better burden, but that doesn't really make sense. And I also stated that they say college students know what they're going into, but of course they're being scammed in actually real life. So if we actually do if we actually do forgive these student loan debt, we're actually making it more fair because we're essentially unscamming these students who got scammed by these companies. Additionally, when we go back to talking about productivity, $1.3 trillion, it speaks for itself. It's such a huge amount of money. The economy, productivity, everyone's mental health would be so much better off if we could only implement student loan forgiveness. And And I'd like to conclude by saying that my opponents didn't really have anything to say against my teammate Malik's attack on their original case of first and second contention. So I'd like to quickly reiterate that, firstly, people take a lot of debt and are being scammed. Secondly, that student loan forgiveness, it does not benefit the rich. My teammate Malik read more evidence talking about how student loan forgiveness would actually benefit people with lower incomes. So really, my opponents had nothing really to say about that in the previous speech. So most of their case has just been absolutely decimated, and they really didn't have anything to say to them. With this in mind, I urge a ballot in the
like I said, I'll be third speaker in the negation, and I'm ready. Ready? Okay. Alright, then I'll begin my time. So I'd just like to begin by going over some of the points that my opponents made on the affirmative side. So the first contention was that it helps medical students pay off their loans. If we were to forgive and eliminate all student loan debt, that would help medical students. But we have to remember that 56% of PhD and master's students have debt. And why are we going to make other people pay this off? Why are we going to make people who are living paycheck to paycheck pay off the loans of those who make a lot of money? We know that the people who make the most money are the ones with masters and PhDs. There's a correlation to that. And I believe the affirmation even mentions this. So why are we making them pay? Why are we making those who are working two jobs? Why are we making those who can barely get by? Why are we making them shoulder the burden for the loans of the PhD and master's recipients? Doctors are not the ones who need the most help. The ones who need the most help are the ones who are going to be forced to shoulder this extra cost. And this extra cost is going to be somewhere, it's pretty common, but about $2,000 to $2,500. That will be the cost that each taxpayer will be forced to share for this extra cost. That might not sound like a lot, but if you are living under the poverty line, this is an immense amount. Yeah.
What tax bracket in the United States currently pays the most amount of taxes?
Look, the top 25% of incomes hold 50% of the debt. They are the ones who need to be paying this off because they are the ones who have the most money. They are the ones who are in the best financial situation to do it. The second intention of the affirmation is that students can now go to college without having to worry as much about debt. But now, if we are to eliminate all student loan debt, there is now no longer an incentive for colleges to keep their tuition low. If we were to forgive all student debt, colleges can now charge as much as they want because there's not going to be any more, if you take out a loan, it doesn't really matter because your loan is going to be forgiven eventually. So it doesn't really exactly matter how much college is. So what happens if this is a one-time thing? What happens if we forgive student loans and then all colleges raise their prices? Then we'll just be in a worse place than when we started. We'll have colleges that are charging way too much money and people cannot afford it. And that's actually going to lead to even more of a doctor shortage that the affirmation was talking about because colleges are going to even have higher prices than they have now. Yeah.
Why would doing a only one-time student loan forgiveness or elimination actually make colleges increase their tuition? Like, we're not going to do this a second time. So is there really any incentive for them to actually increase that prices?
What is saying that we're not going to do this a second time? It sets a precedent that we could do it a second time. So, and then their third contention was that they would have an increased quality of life. There'd be better productivity. Over 80% of Americans without student debt should not be in the position where they're paying for other debt. Like I said, less than 20% of all Americans right now have student loan debt. So then we're making 80% of people actually pay that debt. And that's actually going to lead to a quality of life for them, because they're going to be forced to pay for something that they did not pay for in the first place. Yes, yeah.
I think the notion you mentioned earlier about how we're going to create colleges or cause colleges to have increased tuition is incorrect. Fundamentally, right now in the status quo, the tuition is already crazily insane. That's exactly why we need to eliminate student loan debt.
Right. If we're talking about this, think about this. It's unfair to the people, first of all, who've already paid off their debt. And then second of all, if we eliminate all student loan debt in colleges, that means a loan doesn't really matter anymore. You can take out however much you want and it will be, and you can get it paid off. So that means colleges, they're not going to have any incentive to keep their prices down so that ordinary people can afford them. So I'd like to also go back to some of the points that are the opponents attack on our side. So our first contention is that students are personally responsible for their debt. And they said, it has nothing to do with fairness. But it's not just the rich families that would be paying this. Like I said earlier, it's over 80% of the population that no longer has student loan debt. That even though they paid it off, or they've gone to college, or they never even went to college, they will still be forced to pay it off. $300 billion to $1.9 trillion will be the cost of this tax burden that will be shouldered by the working class. It will overall be shouldered by the working class and not the people who actually have the money to do so. And that's actually what it says in one of the sources that we have. It says that $114,000 will be forced to, yeah.
So firstly, don't rich people pay the majority of share of taxes? And secondly, what is the long-term tax impact of not forgiving student loans? This insane $1.3 trillion actually outweigh any additional taxes we have to pay right now?
Well, like I said before, there's a range, and obviously it's possible that we could put out a little bit. It's a lot more possible than that. It could be the tax burden that has to be shouldered by the working class would actually be greater than $1.3 trillion. And that's really where it is. If the rich people are paying taxes, obviously, no one really likes paying taxes, but that is not a problem. If the working class is having to pay these taxes, that can severely be a detriment to their quality of life. The affirmation was also talking about how they were also attacking our contention about, it would benefit the rich if wouldn't help those struggling financially. And they said, why can't the rich just pay the loans? Like I said earlier, the working class would be paying these loans, and that is what would be hurting them. Let's see, the negation or the affirmation was also talking about medical students. I just want to go back to this for a second because the affirmation was saying that at one time cancellation of people that have already graduated college and med school, but then this doesn't take into account the fact that those that are applying still, that haven't graduated college yet, they will still face high tuition and people need to take out loans for this. So for all these reasons, you should go in the negation. Thank you.
My name is Janelle. I'm a court speaker for the Am I judges ready? Am I judges ready? Mine's ready. And I'll begin my visualization now. First, I'm going to go over the major points of passion in the debate. The first is the burden that both teams provided upon others. The affirmation provided a burden of societal productivity. And truly, the negation asks, what does productivity really mean? Which is why the negation provided this burden about societal benefits for overall well-being, like a stable economy. And furthermore, equitability. The affirmation has failed to address equitability because all they say is it's not important. But it is if we want to have a just society. They fail to recognize that, as our second contention said, most loans currently are held by higher income families because, in the affirmative's own logic, lower income students typically go to community college, or they go to colleges where they don't have to take out student loans. So, as the negation has proven with our cards, and as the affirmation has basically agreed to, it is the higher income families, it is the top 25% of income families who are holding student loan debts, and these people are capable of paying these debts off as they should to keep our economy productive. So once again, canceling doesn't help current lower income students that went through college. And also, I want to talk about this idea of free college. Because the affirmation has said that we will create free college or something like that. But what the point of what I brought up in my second speech was that the affirmation's benefits, their first and second contention benefits, are only benefits of free are running on a fallacy. We cannot agree with this because we're not arguing about college, we're arguing about a one-time cancellation of the student debt. They also make the point that student debt companies are scamming students, but once again, the negation has proven that students go in knowing that they're going to take these loans out. They're responsible for their own debt. And the affirmation has said that yes, students have to consider how much tuition costs. They have to consider what their financial decisions are going to be. So the affirmation also agrees that students consider what their decisions are before they take out these student loan debts, meaning that they are responsible. And furthermore, they went in knowing because a lot of them knew they were going to get careers in things like medical school, high-paying doctors or lawyers, or all of these jobs that are high-paying and allow them to pay off this debt and contribute back to the economy. Finally, the affirmation's third contention about quality of life and increasing production still resolves on the argument that college needs to be free. Because one, people went to college, and many didn't go to super expensive colleges because they made those financial decisions. If we cancel student loan debt right now, it is the 80% of workers who are paying for the 20% of people who took these student loan debts. Because once again, that 80% didn't take out student loan debts because of their financial situation. So we would still have to increase taxes. And one of the most important points here is this increase in taxes. Because the affirmation is trying to tell you that the economy would only be benefited because workers would have more free time. But what would actually happen is by saving this $1.3 trillion in student loan debt, we would be increasing and having $1.9 trillion in taxes for people in the United States to pay off. And because of these reasons, and because the affirmation has failed to acknowledge that people go into college knowing that they're taking out student loan debt, we must see a negative ballot.
Before I begin this meeting, of course, want to get through some things. Just kidding, I already did that. I won't subject you guys to that yet. I'm sure it's probably not super excited for you guys the first time around, but that's okay. Of course, let's get into the final speech for state tournament. When I was younger, my mother always told me one thing: never give up. Now, whether or not you believe that welfare really this elimination will really be a mandate solution, that's up for debate, of course, up to whether or not we're convinced of otherwise. But even if it is a mandate solution, we would still argue it's better to try than to do nothing at all. Now, what can you expect in this speech? First, I'm going to cover a couple of flashpoints on burden. Then, I'm going to cover a couple of points that the negation has unfortunately dropped in the round. And then we're really going to get on to the issues with the paper ballot before we have. First, on the burden. Throughout the entire round, there has been near to no coverage on the burden debate at all. We've come up here time and time again and told you that what's really important is societal productivity. They talk about fairness, but in their world, they don't even tie fairness to any of their case. Their point about the rich has already been dropped. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But one key clarification I do want to make is that we never, ever, throughout this entire round, admitted that to the idea that with eliminating student loan debt, we had increasing tuition. That's a point we continually contested, something that they have tried to say that the administrators don't buy that, it's not true. Now, let's take the next maybe 2.5 minutes to talk about the points they dropped and the reasons why the ballot is ultimately being passed. First, they dropped personal responsibility. Their first contention, which honestly is a decent contention about personal responsibility, again, had no coverage, no response. What we tell you is that with colleges, you don't know what you're getting yourself into. Even if people choose to do so, while you are in debt, you are in a bad place. You're living paycheck to paycheck. You're probably eating McDonald's because that's all you can afford. Who knows how many roommates you might have in your small apartment because you're trying to pay back your debt. Ultimately, no response has been made on that front, and Eric has pushed this point very far with, of course, his terminology of scams. Second is the point about the rich. If anything, we see throughout this round that if anything, the rich are just going to be hurt. Think about it this way. If we do eliminate student loan debt, who's going to pay for it? They have conceded that the rich are the majority taxpayers. We live in a progressive tax system. It's not going to be the the lower end of the income spectrum that is ultimately going to have the burden of eliminating student loan debt. Lastly, about how elimination hurts. Go ahead, I'll just say this straight out, $1.3 trillion. That's all that needs to be said. Now let's talk about how your ballot is on the further side. First, we tell you about medical students. They have no solution for this litigation. Nothing. They offer you nothing. They have dropped all our responses on this. The only thing they say is that there are other medical schools people can go to, things like that. We've already told you. If I am an undergraduate student who has a bunch of debt, why would I go to another $200,000 in debt for medical school? And then it's going to take me another, who knows how many years to pay all of that back. They came and said, well, that means that people who are doctors have money, so they're going to be able to pay it back. But remember, think about those doctors' mental health during the time they are deep in debt. That's something they completely ignore. And that's actually going to be the last point I'm going to address. But before that, I want to talk secondly about economic impacts. Remember, people are going to be more productive. That's going to help the economy. And in the long run, according to the Federal Reserve themselves, $1.3 trillion is going to be saved. Because remember, that debt compounds over time. When I'm in debt for longer, my debt actually increases. That's what debt is. That's why, with economic impacts, we're going on further. Lastly, on quality of life and productivity, our burden potential. Human dignity is number one. Remember our burden, societal productivity. Ultimately, if we can save 24% of people in the status quo, I would say that that's something that we should do. And in the words of my mother, never give up. For the last time, you're going to be happy.